Welcome to Not Starving Artist, the podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Benson, money coach and equity actor. I am your financial cheerleader, here to help you build your financial confidence and have power over your money. The best part, no budgeting or bi-weekly paychecks required. I went from being a broke BFA grad having weekly panic attacks about money to a financially confident, wealth-building actor and business owner. Money gets to feel fun, simple, and sexy, and I am going to show you how. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about how to save more money without cutting back, or how to hit any new money goal that requires putting money aside for the future, whether that be investing, whether that be debt payoff, all of that without feeling like you're cutting back and restricting. And I was having a conversation with one of my clients this week. And when I'm talking with my clients who are playing in tighter margins, that's what I like to call when your income and your outgoing, like your income and expenses, are pretty much the same, or you're in the in the red, right? When more is going out than what's coming in. I like to call that tight margins because that's all that is, right? So I also want to articulate like how we speak about money and our financial situations are really important. Tight margins is a much lighter term than saying like I'm broke, right? So when you're playing in tighter margins, I was talking with this client who is playing in tighter margins right now. And one of the things we were talking about was like, I don't feel like I can spend any less than I already am. Like I know there are expenses I could cut back, but like everything feels super important. Like, how do I give up my sacred cows is one of the things that he was talking about. Now, I want to be very clear too, when this conversation with this client happened after we had brainstormed and talked about all of the different ways that he can increase his income and his family unit can increase what's coming in, because bringing in more income is always the more fun option than removing spending. Now, removing spending is a tool that you can utilize for a season of your life, especially when you're playing in tight margins, when the removing some spending is going to bring your nervous system more ease, when it's going to give you more wiggle room. Wiggle room feels so luxurious. And so choosing to spend less than you currently are spending can be a tool for a season that can actually feel more luxurious. Now, when we're talking about, so I wanted to bring context to that conversation, because when we're talking about financial wellness, the financial wellness diagram is managing the money you currently have, making more money, and your money mindset. So we always talk about all three categories. We're always going to talk first about increasing income. We're going to audit what's currently happening in your money, and then we're going to talk about increasing your income. And then we go back to, okay, and so while you're increasing your income in that interim time, if you're in tight margins, what are the other things we can do to bring you more ease, to decrease your anxiety, to give you more wiggle room? Okay, so that's the context of this conversation. And so we were talking about what his expenses were and what he was spending money on, and how all of the things that are currently in his lifestyle, like he's already done an audit, right? And removed the fat basically of all the stuff that wasn't actually bringing him joy, wasn't increasing his quality of life. That audit has already happened. So now we're left with the stuff that actually does, like he believes, brings him and his partner a lot of joy. And so that's where the phrase giving up the sacred cows came from. And so when we're talking about cutting back, right? Like removing spending. In this conversation, there was a lot of verbiage of like, I don't want to restrict. I don't want to cut back. I don't want to deprive myself. And what I want to point out to every one of you who is listening is it's so interesting that our brains immediately, when we think about not spending money on something, our brains equate it to deprivation, restriction, and cutting back. So I want you to think about all of the things that you are not spending money on right now, right? Like I'll think about myself in this current moment. I am not spending money on a 2-bedroom apartment in New York City. I'm spending money on a 1-bedroom apartment in New York City. I am not spending money on monthly vacations, right? I am not spending money. Oh, we'll talk about massages in a second. I have a personal example for me, right? Like I'm not spending money on massages. There's so many things that I am choosing to not spend money on, right? That I would like to spend money on, or that like I just don't care about. But not spending money on those things doesn't mean I'm depriving or restricting or cutting back. But our brains have equated it in that way. And I think when we're talking about not spending money on something, that can either be viewed and felt in your body as a restriction and a deprivation, or it can be felt as expansive, as in control, as confident in your finances. And I'm going to give you a way to like lighten this when you're choosing to not spend money on something that like you think is a huge part of your quality of life. And I'll give you some examples as well. But the tool I'm going to give you here is the 2-month experiment. The 2-month spending experiment. And what this is, and again, this client, I'll give this very specific example. We were talking about like, what would it look like? He gets biweekly massages. And so what would it look like for 2 months to not get biweekly massages? And let's see what happens. And after 2 months, you will have data and make discoveries about what that thing actually was in your quality of life. And so what this 2-month experiment is doing is it's lightening the load of like, you're not cutting back because you have to. You're not restricting because you're playing in tight margins. Like it's not okay, and now I have to take this out and I can never have it again. Because what that does is that triggers our inner toddler, like our inner temper tantrum, where it's like, oh, I want it. You're taking it away from me, right? We're doing an experiment for 2 months, which after this 2 months, you're giving yourself the option to add that thing back in. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to give you feelings data and tactical data about what that thing, the impact that thing was having on your life. It's like distance makes the heart grow fonder, or it breaks the relationship, right? And like you won't know which one it is until you have the distance, right? And so I'm going to talk about a couple of examples, and then we'll talk about how these play out and a little bit more about how to implement this experiment. So I'm going to give you an example from my partner. My partner a couple years ago was playing in some tighter margins. And one of the things that he decided to cut out was Apple Music. And it was an experiment of like, let's see if I can remove Apple Music from my life and let's see what happens. After 2 months, he was like, absolutely fucking not. Apple Music plays such a huge part in my life. I hate having to listen to my stuff on YouTube and have the commercials. Absolutely not. So then he made the decision after 2 months that Apple Music was actually a huge part of his quality of life because he just listens to things all the time, every day. I had a client who was doing this experiment with her gym membership. And so what she did was she like took her gym membership away because she wasn't super using it. She wasn't super excited about that at that time, but she was like, but wait, like I need a gym membership. After 2 months, she was like, oh, wait, like I figured out that I actually enjoy doing this like specific at-home workout. And like, I don't feel like I deprived or cut back. Like in this experiment, I didn't feel like anything in my life was missing. Okay. I had another client who did a version of this where, and I've talked about this on a previous podcast episode, where she was wanting to redecorate her living room. And I was like, for the next 2 months, you're not allowed to buy any new decorations. You're allowed to Facebook Marketplace, like something small, but you have to go through your house and try and redecorate and make your living room something that's really exciting to you just with what you have. Don't spend any money on anything new. What happened was she went through her house, she redecorated this whole thing. Her living room looks so incredible now. It's so beautiful. And it came from all the stuff that was just already in her house, right? It was already there. And so now she was also able to like collect the data of, oh, I actually didn't need a whole new living room set. what I needed was like this specific piece, and this specific piece, I want it to serve this specific purpose. And now, like, I know exactly what I'm looking for. So it gave her some specificity of like what wasn't vibing in her living room, rather than just trying to buy a whole new thing to try and solve a problem that she didn't really understand what she was trying to solve for. So in this experiment, and we're calling it an experiment because this isn't just like tricking your brain to be like, we're just cutting it out for 2 months, right? No, we're like actually experimenting over 2 months. And at the end of those 2 months, you get to make a decision whether you want to keep it, whether you want to leave it out, or whether you want to like have a, and this is like the all or nothing thinking, whether you want to replace it with something or adjust it with something. I had a client who she again was playing in tighter margins, and she would get her nails done. Like, she loved having really fun, fancy nails. And so she did this experiment and stopped getting her nails done like at the salon. But she was like, but I really love looking at really nice nails. And so she just started doing press-on nails. After a month, she was like, whoa, I actually love that I don't have to spend time at a salon getting my nails done. I just realized I love looking at my pretty nails. And now with press-on nails, I can switch them up more often. It is literally a penny of the price that I was paying before. And I still get the same joy because I get to look at pretty nails and they look the same in photos and things like that. So that experiment, it wasn't like she was now like not allowed to have fun nails. She found a lower cost substitution that brought her just as much joy. But she didn't realize that she actually didn't like going to the salon, like going to get her nails done for multiple hours. She didn't even realize that that was a hindrance to her lifestyle until she put the option on the table of taking it away. And then what else could you fill it with, right? It's like opening the door to other options, other possibilities, other opportunities that unless you put this experiment on the table, your brain can't even give you other options. And I'm talking a lot about tight margins right now. If you're in tight margins, this is a really great tool to use. But you can and should do this at any income level. I still routinely do this. If you have $1 million business, you should be doing this. If you've retired early and you got all the money in the bank, you should do these experiments, because this is about lifestyle assessment. This is taking inventory of your priorities. So often we're just running on autopilot and we forget to take inventory of our lifestyle. We tend to have moments where we take inventory of our stuff, right? We do a house clean out, you do some spring cleaning, you do your closet clean out, you go through your bathroom. Like, we do the stuff cleaning out. But when it comes to lifestyle assessment, we don't do the same kind of inventory taking. We make it mean something about our life if we have to cut something out, instead of what would it be like if I just put this away. I do this with my closet, with my physical things. I do this experiment with my physical stuff because I'm a big like clean outer. I love to clean some shit out. And so there have been many times in my life where I will clean out my closet, and then 2 months later, I'm like, fuck, why did I get rid of that? And I also have a hard time, like, I have a lot of emotional attachment to clothes. And so I also have a hard time like getting rid of certain things that I'm not actually wearing. So what I do now is when I do a closet clean out, I put everything into a bag that I'm like not actively wearing, that I'm like a maybe about. And I put that bag up in the top of my closet for 2 months. And then 2 months later, I'll come back to that bag. And before I go into that bag, I'm like, what is in that bag that I actively miss? What did I miss from that bag? And then I'll go through it and I'll have an understanding over the course of 2 months. What did I miss wearing? What did I actually like forget was there? What do I actually not care about? Because sometimes it's really hard to understand what your priorities are, what you like when something is too close to you, when you're actively like in it, it's hard to assess it, right? Again, distance, sometimes the distance gives you a lot of clarity, right? And you're able to collect more data. And so another example I want to give you is myself with meal kits. There was a time where I felt like I couldn't cook for myself. I was just so busy. I had so much like capacity. My capacity in my brain was just to the brim. So I started getting meal kits. And meal kits and like pre-made meals just became part of my lifestyle for a lot of months. And I was starting to get like kind of cranky about my food, and like I couldn't quite figure out why. And so what I did was like, let me stop with the meal kits and let me see what happens. And so, I mean, and this wasn't even a financial thing. This was just a lifestyle thing of like, this isn't feeling good anymore. What do I want to fill this with? And so removing the meal kits from my life and asking myself the question, what do I want from like how I eat? And the thing that came to mind was ease and simplicity, ease and simplicity. And so instead of going to like full home cooked meals, which I think was what like HelloFresh was giving me, like that just even felt too overwhelming. I was like, how can I make my food so easy and so simple? Which just ended up being like a lot of frozen stuff that I could heat up really easily. A lot of like really, really simple meals that has actually made my life so much easier. And like, I am not like annoyed by my food and how I'm eating anymore. But with me not doing that meal kit experiment, right? Because the meal kits had just become so ingrained in my lifestyle, I was like, wait a minute, maybe it's the meal kit's problem, right? So I removed the meal kit and let me see what I can then fill that gap with, which again, then didn't have to sway into, and now I have to home cook all of my meals and like make it this big thing. And I have to meal prep and meal plan. I think our brains do that so often. We go into this like all or nothing of like, I'm either eating out, YOLO, fuck it, or I'm becoming like freaking home chef. And there's an in between in the middle, right? Where you can have a frozen pizza, or you can like cook some chicken breast with a little bit of seasoning and get yourself your favorite like already seasoned microwavable asparagus, and then you combine that and make this really delicious meal. But it didn't require like making things from scratch, chopping things, right? Again, this is just an example from my life, but do you see how when we assess lifestyle things and do an experiment, you can collect data and discover things that you may not have been able to discover with that thing still in your life? And with this experiment, again, you can do this at any level. This is not just for tight margins. This is for anyone who just wants to assess what am I spending money on in my life? Because where your money goes is where your priorities are. And sometimes we don't even realize we've got money leaks in how we're putting our money towards things until we assess it and remove it and take inventory of it. And again, this experiment, you are allowed to put the thing back in at the end. At the end of this experiment, you are allowed to put it back in. If you realize like, oh my God, wait, those meal kits were for me. Like I need to have those meal kits in my life. There is no way I could survive without these meal kits. Great, put them back in. And then if that putting that thing back in doesn't match up with how the math is mathing of your income and your expenses, then you have a very clear reason and a very clear number of how to raise your income, what you want to raise it to and why, right? We're not just trying to raise our income as much as we can so we can have as many lifestyle things as possible. You know exactly what's important to you, exactly what brings you high quality of life, and exactly what that lifestyle number is, what it costs month to month to live as Brooke in her best life. And yes, there will always be levels, new levels of living your best life and quality of life, right? Like my quality of life now, my best quality of life is different than it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when I was living in a trailer with my partner and we were both making like the minimum wage, right? Very different quality of life now. But assessing my current quality of life, taking inventory of my current quality of life, raising my income, giving yourself wiggle room. And then when you have enough wiggle room, right? When you're like, ooh, now I've got overflow. Now I've got money pooling. Great. Then we can do another lifestyle increase. Okay. So with this experiment, it's going to give you that financial wiggle room that you need if you are in tight margins, remembering it's just for a season. I call this a tool for a reason. It's a tool. This is not a lifestyle shift. It's a tool, an inventory taking tool. And this is also going to help you understand what extra you need to bring in if you're playing in tighter margins. And if you're not in tight margins, this is just going to help you align your spending with your priorities and actually know that everything you're spending money on feels so fucking good. if everything you're spending money on, like if there are just like little things that you're putting money towards that you don't like absolutely love, those are called money leaks. And those will slowly start to drain you, like emotionally, in your financial CEO identity, feeling super confident about your money. You want to make sure you plug all those holes. We don't have anything leaking. I want you to take this episode and take this tool, take this experiment as a way to take the pressure off of like cutting back and restriction. I want you to take those words out of your mouth. I don't want to hear you say cutting back, restrict, deprive. I don't want any of those words in your mouth. I want you to be speaking about it as choosing to spend money on other things, choosing to put money towards other things, choosing to not spend money on that thing. Do you see how the word choice puts you in so much more power? You do have the choice. You can keep spending money on all of these things you want to spend on, but I want you to choose it, to choose it. And so with this, you are able to, and this is why I say like save more without cutting back. That's why this podcast episode is called this, because with this extra wiggle room, you're going to have financial room to put money towards savings, to put money towards investments, to put money towards your vacation savings, right? Like we're not just talking about emergency money and like retirement money. We're talking about just future money for you to fuck around and have fun with too. But you can do this without feeling like you're cutting back and depriving. You're going to play with this experiment with a couple of things to give yourself more wiggle room. And if at the end of this, like let's say you experiment with 6 different things, right? Over 2-month periods, right? So 6 2-month stints at the end of a year, and you realize that all of these things are absolutely necessary in your life. Great. Now you just got to go make up that difference, right? If you're playing in tight margins, or if you're not playing in tight margins, it's like, great. Everything I'm spending money on in my lifestyle feels so fucking good. And what an awesome piece of data to bring into your life of like, I have no fucking money leaks. Everything my money is going towards feels like Brooke, feels like me, feels so expansive. Okay. And again, not spending money on something can feel expansive. I was talking to another client about this specific thing as well, where we were talking about like wealthy people and like multimillionaires and feeling like these people don't have to make financial decisions and just wanting to be in a place where we can just have everything and say yes to everything. Because of how money works, that will never be the case. Every single wealthy billionaire, millionaire, multimillionaire, someone who's retired early, who's financially free, every single one of them is making financial decisions every single day, every single month, right? Like there are people who are multimillionaires who fly first class, but they're not buying the private jet or they're not flying private. Right? I mean, if we want to take Jeff Bezos, right? He's choosing to spend a lot of his money on a lot of things, but there are a lot of great things he could put money towards that he's choosing not to, right? We don't love that, but he is making active choices about what he's not putting money towards, right? And so there is no time in your life where you won't have to choose what not to spend money on. And that gets to feel expansive, again, because it's a choice. You are in control. You get to choose where your money goes. And so coming to terms with the fact that you will always have to make financial decisions. So which ones feel the best for you right now? Okay. Enjoy playing around with this experiment. DM me, let me know how it goes at the end of your 2 months, and happy spending, babies. Thanks so much for tuning in. Come join me on Instagram for more on how to build a simple, sexy relationship with your money. My Instagram handle is @NotStarvingArtists. And if you want to dive deeper with me, head to the show notes to learn more about one-on-one coaching. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend that you want to get rich with.